My manipulative fiancé cheated on me, so I got an abortion behind his back. He convinced me to take him back, and that turned out to be the worst mistake of my life. My fiancé, Chase, always wanted to be a father. About 6 months ago, he finally manipulated me into trying for a child. I say manipulated because he knew I wanted to be child-free, but still managed to brainwash me into believing that my sole purpose was to bear children. However, this isn't the reason I had the abortion. I was terrified of being a mother, so when I became pregnant, I frequently turned to my fiancé for help. I'd cry and call him while he was at work, begging him to tell me everything would be okay. My hormones were all over the place, and I often took it out on him, sometimes yelling or nagging him more than I should have. It got to be too much for him, and he started distancing himself. Then, he began working late, and eventually, I found out that he was having an affair with someone named Stacy. Learning that my fiancé was cheating on me while I was pregnant was the most emotional pain I have ever felt. I was only 2 months pregnant at the time, so the next morning, I drove to the hospital and got the procedure done. When I got back home, Chase greeted me at the door. I looked at him with a lot of anger in my eyes, unable to suppress it. I asked him who Stacy was, and he looked at me like a deer in headlights. It took him a minute to get his words out, but he said Stacy was his cousin. He then accused me of going through his phone again. Earlier in our relationship, I had caught him still using online dating apps and told him to delete them. He explained that it didn't matter if he still had an account because he was only dating me at the moment. I let it slide for a couple of months until I found him texting a girl he matched with. Although he wasn't cheating on me with her and the conversation didn't cross any boundaries, I felt he shouldn't text her on principle. We got into a big argument about my lack of trust in him and how I shouldn't have been snooping. I hurt my own feelings by being nosy. We went to couples counseling after that, and over the past few years, our relationship got better. However, recently, the signs of infidelity started reappearing. He sounded exactly like he did years ago, telling me how I needed to stay out of his phone and how I was interfering with his privacy. I asked him why he got me pregnant if he knew he wasn't ready to be with only me. He replied that he was stressed out at work, and the pressure of our relationship made him turn to his cousin Stacy. I took a deep breath and told him that I was no longer pregnant. He went mad and called me every name in the book, saying I was a backstabber and worse. He accused me of ruining his happiness at becoming a father. I told him that my trust in him was ruined, but he didn't seem to care. He said, "Well, at least I didn't get rid of our kid." He felt betrayed, and I told him, "Welcome to the party." He said he was leaving, and despite the infidelity, I asked him to stay because I knew I still loved him and felt he loved me too. But he was already out the door. In the next few days, while scrolling through social media, I saw his family posting rude things about me. They called me every name he had called me the week before and had the story all mixed up. They said I aborted our baby because I just didn't want to be a mother and wanted to sleep around with guys before officially getting married. They painted me as the person who had an affair. Some even harassed me online and on my phone. I got cruel messages from numbers I had never seen before. I felt like my world was ending. I felt so misheard and abused. About a week later, I got a call from Chase, saying he had broken things off with Stacy and wanted to continue planning our wedding. He told me those days were behind him and apologized for his family's actions. He asked them to remove the posts they made about me, and they eventually did. He also apologized for the name-calling and for freaking out about the baby. He said he understood why I did it and that it was no longer a concern. I was happy to hear from him again, and since he said those days were behind him, I believed him. In hindsight, it's easy to see that I was foolish, but I fell for his tricks again. We moved back in together the following week, and things were finally going back to normal. Then, it started again. Every time we had a fight, he would bring up the abortion and storm out of the house for a few days. His family would begin the cyberbullying again. He would come home, apologize, and the cycle would repeat. I kept forgiving him. I felt stupid for doing so, but I was in love. Every time I tried to live my life without him and told myself I was done for good, I would remember the good times we shared on the beach, the intimate conversations, and the happy memories of our relationship. These memories made me feel like I was losing something good for me. I convinced myself that things would get just as good as they were at the beginning of our relationship, and that this was just a rough patch. I told myself that he only had eyes for me, and tried not to let the cheating affect our relationship. I started to try to do more for him to keep him home so his eyes wouldn't wander. Each time he left, my family breathed a sigh of relief, because they were constantly telling me to leave. My mom said it would be easy to leave since we weren't married and didn't have kids together, and I agreed. It would be easy, but I didn't think I would feel fulfilled in any other relationship like I did with Chase. After another argument, I was sure I was done with Chase. He had crossed the line this time by getting my family involved and having his family post about me and my parents. But before I could try to get over him, Chase came back asking for another chance and planned an elaborate getaway together. I told him no, but it was to our favorite vacation spot. We had gone there early in our relationship when we were still in the honeymoon stage. I thought to myself that this could be the spark missing from our relationship. I agreed and hugged him. He took me to a beautiful resort on the beach for the weekend. We ate, drank, and enjoyed every minute together. He loved me then like he had never loved me before. I fell even more in love with him, not knowing that was possible. He talked about how sorry he was, how much he'd taken me for granted, and that this time would be different. I believed him and laid with him in the sand, watching the sunset. When we got home, it felt bittersweet. I finally got the relationship I wanted, but I didn't want to leave the resort. It felt amazing with just me and him, no family telling us to break up or other people for him to focus on. A couple of weeks went by, and we had another argument, this time about milk. He said I should have bought 2% instead of almond milk. He blew up, telling me that I couldn't do anything right and that he should have known I didn't listen because of how I aborted our baby. He brought up the baby in every argument. He made me believe that he had changed and that he had forgiven me. He would tell me sweet little nothings all the time to get back in my good graces, but I was beginning to get tired of it. Our wedding was in less than 6 months, and I wondered if I could be with someone who could hold a grudge against me for the rest of my life. I also wondered if he would stop holding it against me if I got pregnant again. Either way, I just wanted my Chase back.
He did his usual storm out and left for a few days. Those few days actually began to feel more peaceful. I didn't feel as trapped in our relationship. I didn't feel as insecure when he wasn't around. I didn't feel like I was on edge, wondering where he was or if he was with another girl. I went to work and came home each day, and that life that I once thought was boring became the peace I needed.
This peace was disrupted when I started seeing his family's posts again. They began tagging me and saying really hurtful things about my abortion. The posts became more personal and hurtful each time. I tried my best to ignore them because I knew he would just appear on my doorstep soon. But then one of the posts started gaining traction. It went from 30 likes to 300 likes to over 3,000 likes. I had so many people in my DMs spewing hatred towards me without knowing the full story. They sided with my fiancé, said that I was wrong for not talking to him about it first. Some said that I would make a terrible mother, and some were threats from pro-lifers. I felt terrible. His family leaked my home address in the comments of the viral post, and people knocked on my door and vandalized my house multiple times. I was scared to leave my home, fearing I could be hurt because of what they had done. Someone left razor blades in my mailbox. People in the comments even gave out my phone number and the place where I worked. My phone rang off the hook day in and day out. I had to change my phone number, but I was too afraid someone would recognize me out of the house. One day, my boss called and asked about the post. He asked me what the story was and if it was true. I told him my side of the story, and he said he wanted to see me in his office the next day. This shook me to my core. Chase had ruined my life. When I went to work the next morning, no one bothered me, thankfully, and I ended up in a seat across from my boss. We had a long conversation, and I basically begged to keep my job. After hearing my plea, he agreed to put me on probation for 90 days and let me keep my job. As I was returning home, I saw Chase in my driveway. It took everything in me not to run him over. He had chocolate and flowers waiting for me. As I got out of the car, I brushed past him and walked into the house, He followed me and started with apologies. I told him that he had gone way too far, and that if he didn't leave in the next 30 seconds, I would call the police. He got upset and said that I didn't deserve him anyway. He talked about all the other women who were dying to have a chance with him, and how I was throwing away all the good times we had shared. I knew this trick all too well and stood my ground. I slammed the door in his face and called the cops. He banged on my door and yelled threats for what felt like forever. When they arrived, I told them everything about the cyberbullying and his trespassing, and they arrested him. I was proud of myself for standing up for myself and not letting this man negatively affect my well-being while he gave me crumbs of his love. It wasn't until then that I realized how poorly he had treated me. I had his family come get his clothes, and they were pissed. They called me names, and I told them if they kept it up, I would press charges on them too. They quickly hushed and left. I ended up selling the house so the people online couldn't know where I lived anymore and moved in with my best friend, Chelsea. Chelsea helped me heal, and things started to look up from there. With the help of my loved ones, I was able to regain the confidence that had been deteriorating while I was with Chase. Eventually, I got promoted at my job and was making more than enough money to take care of myself. I started taking myself on more vacations with my friends and family. Initially, I was upset with myself for wasting years with Chase and for constantly disrespecting myself by staying with him. But through prayer and therapy, I learned to pour the love that I was giving to everyone else into my own glass.